respected colleagues, students, and honored guests. Welcome to the 10th session of Readings on Civilization organized by the Center for Malay Islamic Civilizational Studies. My name is Murad and I will be moderating for today's session. So this is the first session on reading Melayu in Leonard Andaya and Anthony Milner, The Dynamics of Consciousness. For those who want to explore and engage more on Malay history and civilization and the evolving concept of Melayu, this is a perfect reading session for you. So before we begin, I would like to ask a very simple question to our speaker today. So Prof, why Andaya and Milner? We have a lot, and we have other Western scholars such as Winstead, Prof, and Ray. But why Andaya and Milner? We choose Andaya and Milner.
Oh, you're asking me my answer now. Okay, thank you. Thank you for asking the question. This session is to provide you with another reading of Melayu, because what we have are a number of perspectives on knowing and on understanding the term Malay and the semantics of Malay. I'm avoiding, first of all, I want to avoid the nationalist reading of the Malay. This nationalist reading of the Malay has been around over the last few decades, but it has emerged as a very strong discourse and creating its own narrative especially since the 1990s. And this are mostly articulated by Malay scholars, Malay activists, advocates of Malay heritage and nationalism. I'm not saying that they are improper, but I'm saying that this is one narrative. The other is a colonial reading of the Malay. To respond to you, Winstead, Wilkinson, Swettenham, and this colonial reading of the Malay is also important for us to know. They were written at that particular moment in history. Yeah? They were written at that particular encounter between the Europeans, and especially we're talking about early British administrators in the 1800s and early 1900s. Not only Winstead and Wilkinson, also Dussek, and earlier Anderson, Hudo, they are apt at describing the character of the Malay. That is one perspective. But I'm going to start with these two, because I thought that the writings of Milner, especially on the Malays, and Andaya, has put a critical distance. They are not involved. They are non-participants in Malay society, and they do not would not likely to have a condescending view of the Malay. They do not come from a tradition, from a colonial tradition of looking down or looking at the Malays as primitive natives, as savages in what we can describe the West now. There's another version. In fact, perhaps in a future lecture, the idea of savage needs to be articulated from another perspective. Why I've chosen Milner and Andaya is because they provide us with another view of the Malay discourse, putting a critical distance and holding in abeyance a judgment, a negative judgment, a connotative judgment on the Malay. And both of these are written in 2008, and both of these were written at a time when a new discourse on the Malay emerged, one of which was the book Contesting Malayness, 1996, by Timothy Bernard and company, which was first deliberated in Amsterdam, I think, and after that it was published by National University of Singapore Press, and that has created a new excitement on the Malay identity, Malayness, the Malay character, and there some of which were in that book was quite negative in a way. For example, Timothy Bernard described the Malay as not having a core. There's no core identity to the Malay. And the Malay is not defined anthropologically. And the Malay in the Malaysian Constitution also is not defined anthropologically. The Malay in the Malaysian Constitution, the Federal Constitution, has been defined legally. So definition of Malay is based on a legal definition in terms of culture, in terms of practice, and in terms of belief. And based on the Federal Constitution, anybody can be a Malay. Anybody who habitually speaks the Malay language, anybody who practices Malay culture, and who is a Muslim, can be identified as a Malay, accepted as a Malay. So when I was asked a question: can a Chinese become Prime Minister of Malaysia? I said yes, if the Chinese is accepted by the Malay. In other words, acceptance of the Malay by a non-Malay would assume also that that person becomes a Malay. Again, these are some of the the variants and the tenuous ways of looking at Malayness in Malaysia. So, what is happening in the writings of Andaya and Milner especially is surveying Malay identity over time and space. I will begin. Can I begin now? Yeah, sure. I will begin with Andaya. The idea here is to share with you a very important work that does not have any emotive connotation. There is son's emotion, son's involvement. There is a narrative that does not make a judgment on the existence of the Malay. Now, why this is important also is because in any society, the public will be exposed to at least 3 levels of discourses. And this is very important for all of you as students. Postgraduate students in the social sciences, in the humanities, studying society in Malaysia. One is what we call a popular discourse. Popular discourse. Second is academic discourse. Third is policy discourse. These discourses are not mutually exclusive. In other words, they inform one another. And this book falls under academic discourse. But what's important here is the premise of this book is based on the popular discourse of the Malay. Andaya, especially Milner, was reacting on the dynamics and the problematic of the Malay in the 70s and 80s, articulated by the public, and especially after 1996, there is a surge of digital articulation with the use. Why 1996? That's when the internet was introduced in Malaysia. And if you find in early 2000, we follow the discourse. Early 2000, there were discourses deconstructing Malay identity, deconstructing the existence of the Malay, questioning the legitimacy of being Malay, questioning the status of being Malay. In fact, the word Malay has become a bad word in some societies. in Malaysia. One of which is, I have to say, if people in Penang were to listen, in Penang itself, the Malay has become a bad word. The Malay has become a similar word to the word kill, huh? Or other words. So that is apparent in Penang, perhaps as well as if you look at the discourse in parts of Malaysia. Yeah? So it arises from this popular discourse, and this popular discourse it's picked up by when I talk about popular discourse, I mean you can read it through the social media, through newspapers, through magazines, through books, through conversations and people interacting with one another, common assumptions of the Malays, saying that the Malays originate from Yunnan, the Malays are divisive, the Malays are xenophobic, the Malays wanted to project ketuanan Melayu. The Malays do not want to be integrated with the non-Malays. The Malays would want to have its own society in Malaysia. These are popular discourses. The Malays are prone to entertainment. So again, these popular discourses are much prevalent. And these were picked up by academics, by university professors, scholars, and these appear in academic journals, in books, and in other academic work. But these are informed. These are they one informing the other, and these discourses are also picked up at the policy level, articulated by policymakers, by governments, by states, resonated and reflected. So here, when you talk about the Malay, it becomes a problem. Or is it a problem in the first place? Again, I here do not want to define the Malay. I do not want to go into the narrative of the origins of the Malay. I want to go into how the Malay has been narrated by these two scholars. And to me, when I read Andaya and Milner, and also, yeah, this is another book. This is a very interesting book, Kerajaan. If we want to know about the intricacies of the Malay psyche, you read this book, also this book, especially Milner. Okay? We met Milner about 2 months back, Tanggu. We had lunch. Yeah. He came here and we talked about his work, and I told him that I enjoyed reading this book. Then his response was, I enjoyed writing it. I was impressed, actually. I'm impressed by Milner, because this book, of course, there are other books by Milner, one of which is The Invention of Politics in Colonial Malaya, which is a must-read for anybody who wants to understand contemporary Malay society. The other side, the flip side of Milner is Rolf's Origins of Malay Nationalism. Okay, so you want to know Malay society, which I told in my class. Yeah, this one. So this is important, and significantly, these are not written by Malay scholars. Number of Malay scholars, many Malay scholars have written about the Malays. Right? Who are they? Example, Anwar Omardin, who wrote a big, lengthy treatise of Malay identity. We have Taib Osman. We have Samsu Amri. We have, who else? But not many. And most of them who wrote about the Malays would be partial. I also, I want to point out about this partiality of this inability to be balanced and objective. Before I go into this, there's one example. There's one monograph on the Jawi Peranakan, written in I think 1980. Jawi Peranakan. Well, who is the Jepernakan? Jepernakan is the outcome of the marriage between South Indian Muslims and Malay. Okay? Between South Indian Muslims and Malay. Literally speaking, I'm one of them. Okay? The classic Jayapan, you see, these are the intricacies. And just to help you understand the intricacies here, the Jayapanakaran is a society mainly referring to Pulau Pinang, mainly referring to Pulau Pinang. But the Jayapanakaran, in terms of in terms of identity, in terms of existence, have been around for centuries. But in modern history, from the 1800s and 1900s, the term Jayapanakaran is used for the offspring of the intermarriage of the Indian Muslims. When I say Indian Muslims, so it's not correct. It's from the Coromandel Coast and the Malabar Coast and the Hadramis. Coromandel Coast, Malabar Coast, Coromandel Coast is the east coast of Indian subcontinent, from Tamil Nadu to Odisha. That's Coromandel Coast. And Malabar from right up to Goa, okay? What is now Kerala. And the Hadramis, what is now Yemen. Okay? They sail across the Indian Ocean. They came to Pulau Pinang or Singapore or Aceh or North Sumatra, and they married the Malays. Okay? Malay women. They married Malay women. Their offspring, sociologically, has been called Jayapakan or Jayapanakan. And Jayapanakan is an official word used in the census of the Strait Settlement between 1878 to 1920. I found this in my, the older generation, my uncles and all that, race Jayapanakan. Some of the old people in Malay, the race is Jayapanakan. So Jayapanakan is an official term, and until about 1920s, this term is no more used, or because the British found out that many of the offspring of Jayapanakan have been assimilated into Malay society, and then therefore they become Malay, they take on a Malay social identity. So this happened in Pulau Pinang and Singapore. In Malacca, it's called Peranakan Keling. It's not called Jayapanakan, it's called Peranakan Keling. Abdullah Mushi is one of them. And his descendants also, but they don't refer to themselves as Peranakan Keling, they refer to themselves as Malays. Similarly, many people in Singapore and Penang, like my cousins and my relatives, they refer themselves as Malays. We don't refer to ourselves as Jayapanakan. We are socially Malay, legally Malay, because we speak Malay, practice Malay culture, and Islam, it's Muslim. Baba Junior. Oh, that's the Chetty. Peranakan India, yeah, Peranakan India, yeah. Peranakan India. These are the Chettis, the Chitti in India. These are Hindus who came to Malacca in the 1500, and they assimilated into Malay society, but they're not Muslims. They practice a hybrid culture. They speak Bahasa Melayu, like the Babas and Nyonyas, and the culture is amalgamation of Hindu culture and Malay culture, and their cuisine is Malay. Have these elements of Malay and asam pedas and all that. So they also Peranakan. So the Peranakan, why I'm saying this is because the Peranakan identity is quite complex and intricate. Okay? Some people say that the Malays are also Peranakan. As over the years, there are terms like Melayu betul, Melayu pure Malays, Melayu betul, Melayu jati. Ya. Ada yang bukan orang sendiri, ini Melayu jati, pure Malay. And then as opposed to darah keturunan Keling and darah keturunan Arab, Rahim Kajai and so on, popular in Singapore in the 30s and in Penang. I would volunteer to be darah keturunan Keling. Anyway, and also there are various definitions: original Malay, homeland Malay, and other forms of Malays in the concentric circle. So these are some of the labelings given to the Malay, and again, the term pure Malay again is questionable. Who and what is a pure Malay? So what Andaya and Milner is doing is trying to map out. Andaya maps the Malay over space. Milner maps the Malay over time. Okay? Now, first of all, who are these people? Andaya is professor of South Asian history from University of Hawaii at Manoa, born Filipino, and he's been writing about South Asian history. He has been writing about one of the most authoritative books on the history of Malaysia is by Andaya. I think now would have been what, third edition. I understand that he's working on a fourth edition. Yeah. The fourth edition. As okay, as another component. Yeah. So Andaya is he has been very familiar in this part of the world, and his wife is also a historian, Barbara Andaya, who has written on Johor, on Perak. And it's very interesting to see, and these are no, I don't find this written by Malay historians. Again, there is this ethnic dimension. Only yesterday I was at the Persatuan Sejarah Malaysia conference on intellectual history. Tuanku, we're waiting for Tuanku to be there because there are many papers that will be related to Tuanku's knowledge and interaction. So yeah, yeah, yes, also forwarded. So we discussed about the Hukum Kanun, we discussed about figures of Malay biography, we discussed about colonial knowledge, how colonial knowledge has silenced Malay constitutionalism until now. So so the Malays, one of the things, one of my concern, and should be the concern of all students here in writing about Malay society, is the inherent prejudice, the bias that one has in writing one society. And among the Malays, they would, again, among Malay scholars, and the popular notion of the Malay is that if we are not a Malay, we cannot be objective on studying the Malay. It's the opposite. I've seen, I've come across non-Malays being criticized for studying the Malay. And the questions asked, what do you know about orang Melayu? Why do you study orang Melayu? Why are you a student of Malay Studies Department? These are the things coming from the Malay. And also, what I discovered, we're talking about also Indian history on the first day. I find that the Malays are prejudiced against the Indians. The issue of the theme of Indianization. A number of them at the conference, they raise this question. Now there's a discourse saying that the Malays were never Indianized. The Malays were never Hindu Buddhist. The Malays were Agama Hanif. Again, this poses a problem of the wave of what we call Indianization by CDs, Sastry and Majumdar. These are scholars who have written in the 30s and 40s, who have observed the interaction and the connection between the Indian subcontinent across the Indian Ocean and Bay of Bengal to the Malay archipelago. Yet, the recent narrative cancels and rejects this process of Indianization. I'm not going to argue about that, but what I see is that even among scholars, there is a high element of prejudice against the Indians. So much so that many Malay scholars who study history do not know the intricacies of India. They say that India is a monolithic whole. There are no variations in terms of ethnicity, in terms of they think that when you talk about Indianization, it comes from North India, and also they reject that the base of Bahasa Melayu is Sanskrit. Now you find that people are talking about Bahasa Melayu. You have Arabized. You have base of Malay is what Persian and Arabic, but no Sanskrit. Sanskrit has been blackened out in Malay intellectual history. Not to say that when we say Sanskrit is present, we become Hindus. So again, these are also these have afflicted Malay scholars. So what Milner and Andaya is to mitigate these circumstances. This is a book that everybody should read. Now I will go through. Thank you, Dangu. When I was preparing for this, I have a copy. I have two copies of Milner and one copy of Andaya. 2 weeks back, I was referring to Andaya, and then later I could not retrieve my book in my house. My house is a cluttered whole thing. The whole house is a library, including the kitchen. So I was asking Ridwan I also asking Farhan to get a copy. So finally, Tuanku managed to give me a copy, borrow. And this book, 2 copies, I still can't retrieve it. So finally, I had to borrow from the library. Anyway, and I was searching for copies in Kinokuniya. When I was searching for it, there are no copies. Some months back, there are a number of copies of Andaya and Milner. Anyway, I want to go to Andaya first. And the title of this book is Leaves of the Same Tree. Leaves of the Same Tree, Trade and Ethnicity in the Straits of Malacca. I don't know if this book is popular among history students or in the history department, but I suppose they're read. I would expect them to be text, to be a textbook. This is a supplementary text in my class. Also this book, actually. And this book also. Yeah, exactly. These are texts in my class. Apart from Alatas Islam and Secularism, which has been a text in my postgraduate classes since 1996. When I was in UiTM, when I moved to UTP, which is engineering university, I inserted Alatas. I forced Alatas into the syllabus, and then in the ISTAC. When I was in USM, I had no classes. Fortunately, unfortunately, I had no classes. I was there 3 years. I was promoting and advocating history of Penang and the narrative of colonialism. Okay, this was published. Now, this has been reprinted many times. First published in 2008. And the contents, chapter 1, Malay antecedents, very important chapter. Chapter 2, the emergence of Melayu, emergence of this identity. Andaya may not be all correct. I think some of us would know some of the details. I've also asked him when I met him in USM many years back. I asked him, who were the first peoples in Penang? He said, the Acehnese. I said, no, it was the Minangkabau. Oh, he didn't know about it. So anyway, a small incident. Chapter 3, ethnicization of the Minangkabau. Ethnicization of the Minangkabau. We take Minangkabaus for granted. But yeah, Tuan Ku read the whole thing. Yeah, actually, the whole thing. Then from Melayu to Aceh, chapter 5, the Batak Melayu. And the Melayus have this prejudice against the Batak. I call it the Batak Melayu because all these are within the sphere of the Malay world. The Orang Laut and the Melayu. Orang Laut. Orang Laut mean the Orang Asli. Orang Laut, orang Seletar dan orang Jakun and Hang Tuah. These are all Orang Laut. And the Malays would differentiate. Ini Orang Laut, bukan Melayu. And then the Orang Asli, suku terasing. Suku terasing means the isolated groups of people in the Malay archipelago, which includes Orang Laut, which include the Orang Asli, which include kelompok-kelompok Melayu. And conclusion, framing the Southeast Asian past in ethnic terms. Andaya gives a fresh perspective on engaging ourselves with the Malays. Now I'll read the acknowledgement. So sometimes when you read the book, the acknowledgement of the preface will give you more than you read the book, more than the contents of the book, because it provides you with this proximity by the author. What the author would not say in the text, the author would reflect this in the preface or acknowledgement. This is what Andaya says. Having reached the twilight of my academic career, how old is he? I think it's 80 plus. Yes, right. I have a greater appreciation of any of my projects that reach fruition. This particular book has been long in the making, not only because of the demands of teaching, but also of having ventured into academic disciplines and cultural areas that were less familiar to me. Andaya is a historian. But when I'm not a historian, I don't speak as a historian because I'm not a historian. I was not born from the history department. But when I observe historians in Malaysia, I find that historians have sanitized themselves from culture. Historians have taken on naively a Rankian view, a positive view of history. Hence, they would decontextualize their position and they would look into facts. What are facts? Yesterday, I told them, don't be obsessed with facts. You're addicted with facts. I said, facts can also change. Facts is also a category in the history and philosophy of science. When we say facts today, it will mean another thing tomorrow. So again, this is the problem of Malay historians to justify, especially those who are doing Kedah Tua and who are doing other history. A very naive conception of facts. Anybody who wants to take history must go through intellectual history and must go through history of science and history of art. Then only we know what facts are and what defactualization is. And chapter 1 of Ibn Khaldun, when Ibn Khaldun talks about facts, facts may not be necessarily equivalent to truth. Truth may not necessarily be equivalent to correctness. So again, when we talk about facts, it's not necessarily true. And this is where students and historians must be able to grapple with. What is correct is not true. What is true may not be correct. So again, at a certain moment in history, in the spatial dimension of human history, there was a moment in which facts were defactualized. This was in the 16th century when the divine, God, angels, and prophecy was defactualized. It was a fact, it is a fact by Muslims until now, but in the 16th century, it was defactualized with the collapse of the Catholic Church and with the beginning of the scientific revolution. That's why we have this logical positivism. That's why when you do a thesis or dominantly, you don't cite God as proof. You don't cite God as reality. You cannot even cite the Quran. But I allow Tuanku to cite the Quran because of the fact that God is the ultimate reality. The fact that the angels exist. So that's why we have the social sciences. The social sciences create doubt. The social sciences have this conjecture and do not accept the rejection of the grand narrative forms modern social science. That's why in the social sciences, you cannot study God, you cannot study the angels. You go to the Islamic study department, you go to a divinity department, you study Usuluddin, then only you can write the reality of God. You cannot write the reality of God in the social science, sociology, political science thesis. So here you can relate to the desacralization of politics, as what was mentioned by or written by Nakib Alatas in his book Islam and Secularism, and this disenchantment of nature and the deconsecration of values. All this, although it's not originally from Nakib Alatas, but those three problems affect us in terms of how we produce knowledge. So Andaya uh, uh, uses other sources. Yesterday, there was a paper on the hikayat, the assumption and the accusation that the Malay hikayats are all myth. It was the Sejarah Melayu hikayat Tua was mentioned. I counted. I said there must be a rereading of the Malay hikayats. I know Ahmad Adam will not be too happy if he's around here beside me. Our friend, Ahmad Adam. But I mentioned, for example, Hikayat Merung Mahavangsa. And many of these hikayats, including Hikayat Pahang, Hikayat Johor, Hikayat Banjar, Hikayat Perak, Hikayat Bisa Melayu, all these 300 works must be reread and multiple readings. We're not saying that the hikayats are fiction, but we are saying that there is truth and there is symbolism in the hikayat, and we have to interpret and reinterpret the hikayat based on the background for example, in Merau Mahavangsa, which I'm doing a project. Yeah. Syed is helping me in a way. I'm doing a project on Kedah civilization. Reading Merau Mahavangsa, you can see that the places mentioned, and these places are real places existing in Kedah now, in the peninsula. Again, when you talk about the Garuda, yeah, that could be a Garuda. Garuda is a mythical bird, like the Simuk in Persian literature. And the Garuda would evoke symbolism of birth and decay, of power and so on. So, yeah. Yeah. In the same family. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Right. That's true. Yes, true. Exactly. True. It's very true. So again, in the motives of Malay Perahu, and some of the tempat apa what do you call it? There's one photo of Kelantan in the 1920s where they have this huge burung cendrawasih. Also, you walk the corridor, the plates along ISTAC corridor, that's burung cendrawasih. I painted one based on that. So the cendrawasih is it's okay. Another name is Phoenix. Lagu M. Nasir. Yeah. Apa nama lagu M. Nasir? Phoenix. Phoenix means we don't die, we recreate. So that's the Phoenix. That's one term called the Phoenix factor. Phoenix factor it was referred to some political scientists of after the two world wars, First and Second World War. Much of Europe, Japan was destroyed, but they rose up. So the revival of culture and industries and society. So what happened to Europe, what happened to Japan was called the Phoenix Factor. And of course, you can relate to rise and fall of civilizations. But point here is that coming to Andaya looks at a variety of sources. Hmm? And I find that these non-Malay historians, there's another book which I did not bring by Mozaffar Falati, Kedah, the derivation of a kingship. Mozaffar Falati. Yeah. Mozaffar Falati, my friend, he's Iranian, but he's born in Australia. His father was there. He did a thesis in the Queensland University of Technology, and he mentioned about this. His thesis is on Kedah, but he mentioned about strategy, politics. He mentioned about Baru Mahawangsa. I told him, if your thesis were, if you were to do a defense proposal in University of Malaysia, it will be rejected totally. Because the professor will say, this is mythos. How can you masukkan dalam thesis? This is the, sorry, typical Malay professor. I'm always critical of them. Yeah, exactly. So, tak boleh buat macam Tuan Murad. Kalau masuk dalam history department, they will reject, for example. So that's why in Australia, I mean, that's why, it was there in Australia. And, but anyway, these sources must be reread. And that's what Andaya did. And also, he also read obscure Arab sources. To the Malay scholar, ni tak nak date ni. The Arabs look at things in the opposite way. If you look at some of the Arab sources, they would say that what is east, what is west to us is east to them. Because they look at the map from the north. We look at the map from the south north. But their maps, Ibn Battuta and others, Al-Masudi, Idrisi, look at from the north, south. So the direction is different. And this is where we find in the Arab source. So, Andaya looks at all this. In the process, he said, I've benefited immensely from the generosity of many individuals who are willing to guide me through difficult material. It makes one aware that in any academic discipline, collegial cooperation is essential. And here he acknowledges the various personalities, including Robert Blas. Robert Blas is the one who created the theory of the Malays from Taiwan, Bellwood and Blast. And then Kirk Endicott. Kirk Endicott, if you're familiar with the book Malay Magic, Kirk Endicott, yeah. I met Kirk Endicott in 2006 or 7. His book is from a master's thesis. Was that? Yeah, that's a minute. Yeah, there's a minute. Yeah. So Kirk Endicott, he did his master's at on Malay Magic, and that book became a famous book. Very humble, typical demure, small size American academic, round glasses. At the time, it's 2000. I don't know where he was on. Endicott. Yeah. True. Yeah, yeah. He's an anthropologist. So it's from his master's thesis. Hagmeyer, the one who reads John Mixick. John Mixick is he's a student of O.W. Walters. O.W. Walters was one of the earliest American scholar to study Sriwijaya commerce in the Malay Archipelago and so on. And many of them are students of O.W. Walters, including Milner. There are some books by O.W. Walters. All right. The major part of the research was undertaken in Indonesia, Malaysia, and the Netherlands in 1999 to 2000 through the Fulbright Hays program, and I would like to acknowledge the generous funding that made all this possible. And then he acknowledged, and then he tells us about where he did his research, including National Archives of Netherlands, Royal Institute of South Asian and Caribbean Studies, KITLV, Asia Europe Institute, UST Malaya, and he thanked his dear wife, Barbara Watson Andaya, who wrote about Johor. Um, yeah, yes, 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 yes. So that must be an oral interaction. Yeah, exactly. Um, again, to many Malay scholars and historians, oral history is not legitimate. Again, my counter to them, I'm telling you about my experience in 3 days at the conference, intellectual history. I said, Jambras, Journal of the Royal Estate Society, Malaysian branch, Malay branch, and Straits branch from 1887 until now. These are the whole purpose of oral history. If you want to learn about oral history, you read Jambras. And what happened? It is people like Winstead, Wilkinson, Endicott, and others. They interviewed Bomoh, Pawang, and wrote notes and articles in Jambras. And it becomes a reference for us. In fact, in 1888, when I was in the States, 1983, there was one article in Jambras describing the Malay Islamic jinn, describing the Malay Islamic jinn in terms of the saraban in which they wear. And there were 3 colors. This, I don't remember who, I think it could be Wilkinson, I'm not too sure. That you can identify jinns with 3 colors of the turban: yellow, red, and black. Okay? And how the jinn came about was when he was doing an interview or history, and this person, this Bomoh, was describing, rumah Melayu, you mandi mayat, atas rumah, lepas tu the water will drip, so the jinns will rush and consume the water. Ayat, mandi mayat. So that was the description. And I still remember now, after what, so many, 40 decades, 40 decades, 4 decades, I still remember the description, the color, and so on. That is an example of how oral history has been documented and consumed in the SSM Straits branch of Royal Society. So this is an important source of history. Apart from that, the Hikayat, and also I mentioned newspapers, as which were Dr. Mehmet and myself, we conducted some sessions on the newspapers as sources of oral history. Now, just a little bit on the introduction, after which I'll go to Milner, because the point here is for us to conduct a close reading, not to listen to people giving lectures about Andaya or whatever, not to listen to people giving lectures about Malay society and Malay history, but to introduce this book and to have a close reading. Close reading means to go through word for word. Like Tok Guru baca kitab kuning. Like the person reading hikayat Hang Tuah or hikayat Muhammad Hanafiah or sejarah Melayu to the audience. Like Hamzah Fansuri reading the syair to the audience. In other words, all these orality, the theme is pendengaran, dengar. This is a theme which I'm forwarding in ISTAC over the next few years, in conjunction with the 40th anniversary of ISTAC. The theme of dengar, beginning the first lecture by Dr. Sulaiman Darin on Rumi. In the Quran, the first word is Iqra. In Rumi, the first word is hear, listen to the song of the reed. And the reed is frustrated because it's separated from the root, from the branch. So the angst of separation. So reading and Rumi is both reading quietly and reading loudly. So the point here is that if you want to preserve meaning, there has to be pendengaran, to read loudly and to listen. That's why I don't have slides. slides distract the visual, and hence it distracts the oral. So the focus is on the orality of my narrative. That's my point. Just a short introduction of some 6,000 ethno-linguistic groups in the world, about 1,000 are found in Southeast Asia. This immense ethnic diversity has piqued the curiosity of linguists, anthropologists, and sociologists, but oddly not that of historians until recently. Exactly, that's what I was talking about. Yeah? Especially not that of historians, Malay historians in Malaysia. Yeah? In general, the latter have tended to apply ethnic names loosely, giving insufficient attention to the nature of ethnic identity and the constant redefinition of groups, particularly in the pre-colonial period or before the late 19th century. Historians can therefore profit from social science. This is the approach of Andaya, also of Milner, also of Prof. They use the tools of social science to understand society. They do not only use history. They do not only use the methodologies of history. This is where I think they are one step ahead of many historians. So therefore, profit from social science insights regarding the shifting components that constitute an ethnic group and the complexity of ethnicity as a concept. So the shifting components are very important. And when we talk about the spatial and temporal dimension of the Malay, we find this over the last 2,000 years. Shifts, regardless of what the nature of the shift is, but there are shifts over 2,000 years, and especially in the modern period over the last 500 years, when the Malays interact, or rather when Malay society interact with other components. In fact, the only society that has interacted with the world is Malay society. Malay, you put it in a way, Malay civilization is the outcome of interaction with European civilization, with Arab civilization, with Turkish civilization, with Indo-Persian civilization, with the Sino-Japanese civilization. That's Malay civilization. And these converge together in the Kepulauan Melayu, brought in by the monsoons. That's another discourse, actually. I've written some papers about it, the Malay encounter with the others. And Anthony Reid, very articulate. Anthony Reid has written chapters and books on the Malay encounter with the West and the Malay encounter with other societies. Also, you can read my chapter 2 in the book on the civilizational encounters published by ISTAC in 2022 of Malay encounters. So, historians can therefore profit from social science insights regarding the shifting components that constitute an ethnic group and the complexity of ethnicity. Complexity of ethnicity as a concept. Malay nationalists may not like this. But I think as scholars, all of us are scholars, we have to consider the complexity of identities of people. You see, some scientists, I think in Japan, they have categorized these things as groups of people grouping. They don't call it race. They call it people grouping. Some, of course, the normal word is ethnicity. So the complexities of ethnicity. Ethnicity is not race. One such insight from the anthropologist John Komarov recognizes the ambiguous nature of ethnicity. Ambiguous nature of ethnicity. And this is not only Malay ethnicity. I think the Malays must know. This also refers to Thai ethnicity. You talk to the Thais, They also have a problem with tri-ethnicity. If we talk to people in Iran, okay, although we see Iran as a unified whole unified culture, but they also talk about ethnicity because Iran is not one ethnicity. Iran has many ethnicities, north, south, east, west, and the Shia and Sunni religions coexist. Also, Turkey has many ethnicities. So when we talk about Malaysia as a multi-ethnic nation, we're not the only one in the world, but conditions are different. Yeah. So these are the complexities. Even Japan, uh, problem with Japan is that they only recognize the Ainus about 20 years ago. Before that, they do not recognize the original inhabitants of Japan. The Ainus were not mentioned in the constitution. The Ainus do not exist. The Ainus were taken to be a people without any form. The absence of the Ainus in Japanese society is very brutal. In fact, the Japanese has Japanese has created ethnocide against the Ainus by not recognizing their existence and their history. Uh, one such insight from ambiguous uh, is ethnicity an object of analysis? He asked the question, which many of us will to ask, is ethnicity an object of analysis, something to be explained, or is it an explanatory device capable of eliminating significant aspects of human existence? Andaya looks at describes ethnicity as a device to be studied. They then proceed, referring to Jean and John Komarov, they then proceed to demonstrate the mutual and dialectic influences between ethnicity as an analytic framework and ethnicity as a conceptual subject. As an analytic framework and as a conceptual subject. The Komarovs are just two of many social scientists who have sought to explicate some aspect of this slippery concept. From this vast array of theoretical ideas, I've selected those that I feel have direct relevance to historians who wish to use ethnicity as a way of understanding Southeast Asian history. So again, bear in mind the use of ethnicity as a tool and the use of ethnicity as a concept in not only studying the Malays, but studying other groups of people. All right. Now I will go through Milner. At the back of his book, in the blurb, Anthony Milner is described as Basham Professor of Asian History at the Australian National University and was visiting professor at the Research Institute of the Languages and Cultures of Asia and Africa, Tokyo, 2007. He has also held appointments as Raffles Visiting Professor of History at National University of Singapore and visitor at the Institute of Advanced Studies in Princeton. You know, the thing is, Institute of Advanced Studies in Princeton, literally, you go there to think, that's it. You have to bother about this NQA process, whatever. You go there to think and produce your work. Essentially, that's what it is. And that's what should be created in Malaysia. And in this way, I think ISTAC should also function. You come here to think, not be bothered by other things. Now, okay, Milner has written, as I've said, the Malays, Invention of Politics, Colonial Malaya, and this landmark book in Malay intellectual history. If we want to understand kerajaan, if we want to understand the Malay before the coming of the Europeans, we read this book. There's another book, actually, by Gallic. Gallic was a colonial officer. He has written a number of books on the indigenous systems of the Malays and Malay before the 19th century. But Gallic has constructed his view from a very Eurocentric perspective. Gallic was a colonial officer. I used to read Gallic in my school days, actually, in the early years, before I found Milner. And I found Milner a much objective and balanced, non-judgmental, non-judgmental narrative compared to Gallic. So again, what we see here in this book, Gallic, Milner, and Andaya, are works of intellectual history. Coincided that the intellectual history conference was there, but these are works of intellectual history. So that's Milner, and Milner was popular when he was at the Asia Research Institute in Singapore. Now, this book published in, this is paperback, okay, 2008, originally published in 2008. Now, what I like about this book, it's sort of, Milner has in a way, a metaphysical view of the Malays, spatially and temporally, which no Malay scholar has captured. Similarly, if you're interested in another work, Vladimir Braginsky. Vladimir Braginsky is Russian. He was a professor of Malay literature at SOAS. He passed away about 4 years ago. His book on the history of Malay literature, all of you should read. When his book came about, I think it was 2002, I think any scholar will be awed by the colossal, it's a tome, it's I think about 1,000 pages, you know, your parents know, 1,000 pages thick. No Malay scholar has done that. And Braginsky is another one which I marvel, because Braginsky, one of which his preoccupation was the connection of Rome. How the idea of Rome, the memory of Rome, created Malay dynasties, the dynastic connection. Okay? In Tuanko's work, we talk about the dynastic connection in Patani, Pahang, Aceh, Brunei. There was a dynastic connection. Braginsky created a dynastic connection from Rome of the polities in the Malay archipelago. But he doesn't believe it. See, he doesn't believe in those things. When we read him, when we ask him, he doesn't believe. He doesn't have our sense of belonging. But he looks at it from a detached metaphysical perspective. I don't know what it is, but a detached metaphysical, as if he's a phoenix flying over the universe and looking at this, how Rome came to the Malay archipelago, how it is linked to Iskandar Zulkarnain or Nabi Khidir, and how the personalities of the sultanates of in the peninsula, in the Sumatra, are connected in that metaphysical way. Fantastic book. Another is Murad. He has a bird's eye view of the Malay. I just read to you the contents. Chapter 1, thinking about the Malays and Malayness. One of the earliest periods, I think in the 1990s, early 2000, when the idea of Malayness came about. One may not be a Malay, but one acquires this Malayness, ciri-ciri Melayu, tapi bukan Melayu. Similarly with the Chinese. Cina yang tak tahu cakap Cina are different from Chinese who speak Chinese. So the Chineseness of those, and I've asked Ahmad, how do you define a Chinese? I use chopstick. That's the definition of, yeah, is it? Yeah, that's the definition of a Chinese. Yeah, yeah, the definition. Yeah, I see. Yes, yes, yes. So that's the identity of the Turks. Boleh? Dan besar, yeah, yeah. So again, this idea of associating with objects and values. Second chapter is early histories engaging India and Islam. Again, important, engaging India and Islam, connecting it to the Malay. One has to read Fatimi, one can read Nilakanta Sastri, Majumdar, and Sidis. All these, they talk about the Indianization thesis. Indianization thesis may not mean, is not equivalent to being Hindu or Hinduization thesis. I made a mistake when I was teaching Malaysian studies at the UTP. When I was looking at this thesis, one day in one semester, I told the students, this book is wrong. I was using the same word. It should be theory of Hinduization, not Indianization. After one semester, I reverted to Indianization. Because Indianization may not necessarily be Hindu. It can mean other forms of belief, other forms of values. Yeah, Hindustan. Yes. Yeah, Hindustan refers to geography, not necessarily to religion. East, yeah, true. East of the river Indus. Stan means land. Stan, Istana means land, actually. So again, you must remember, when you talk about Istana, it is land. And this other words referring to land, apa dia? Apa ni? All the Stan, Istana, yeah. And apa lagi? Bustan Garden, yeah. Actually, I also garden, yeah. Right, exactly. And then three, the Sultanates. Again, I realized this when I was teaching Islam and Malaysian culture. Then, while going through, I realized if we want to understand the Malays, we refer to the history of the Sultanates. From there, we can see the structure, the hierarchy, the language, the morals, the values of the Malays. You cannot do away with it. No cause of the Malay should neglect or should deny the history of the Malay sultans. And the history of the Malay sultans is very interesting. At one level, you find some descriptions. Raja is Hindu. Shah is Persian. Tengku is Jawa. Agung is Jawa. Tengku is Aceh. Agung is Jawa. Sultan is Turkish. So again, the Malay Sultanate would resonate these different civilizations coming together. The Arab don't use Sultan. The Arab use Malik or Sharif. All this means leader, but the Turks, I know early on it was not Sultan, but the word Sultan was used. Yam Tuan dan Sultan. Yam Tuan dan Sultan. Yeah. And then four, a Malay or Kerajaan world. A Malay or Kerajaan world. Okay? Five, experiencing colonialism and the making of the Bangsa Melayu. So in chapter 5 only he mentioned Bangsa Melayu. Okay? Bangsa Melayu is, of course there are many narratives, but what Malay say in response to colonialism. 6, building Malays into nation states. Building Malays into nation states. Even this is not really understood by scholars. We describe nation state in the popular parlance, but nation state is a technical term. It has its historical origins. I remember in the 80s, I think, suddenly our Rais Jatin made a speech saying, using the Negara Bangsa. This was late 80s. Yeah. negara bangsa. And everybody was, new term in Malaysia, new term in political in Malaysia, negara bangsa. So everybody uses negara bangsa. But they have to know how, and negara bangsa has its characteristics, has its doctrines, has its principles. And not everybody who studied political science also know negara bangsa. I was a student of political science. I went through the negara bangsa history. I went through the nation state history. Yeah. And, and people are not critical of, if we do not know, we are not critical of negara bangsa, which is mentioned Malaysia negara bangsa, we lose out. Because now Europe is dismantling its notion of negara bangsa. It is becoming, it's portraying itself as a civilization. And the negara, yeah. Negara is means state. Negara or negeri means state. Yeah, yeah. So again, the term negara and negeri is used in the Malay text, but negara bangsa is not. Yeah? But in modern translations, China and Indonesia have expressed themselves as civilization states. And Europe realized that if they don't expand, which actually they have been extraterritorial already, okay? But in recent times, after Gaza and after Iran, they have made proclamations that the only paradigm in the world in future, this was said by the guy Marco Rubio in the Munich European Security Conference, that the future paradigm is European civilization. So in other words, the only measurement for whatever it is Europe. And we have to be concerned. Because why? They are looking at us not as human beings. They are looking at us as subhumans and animals, subjugating our identity. They are extending the epistemic violence upon us. So this is where we have to resist. We are victims of epistemic violence in terms of our identity, in terms of our territory, but we don't realize it. And this is where our job as scholars have to be important. 7, multiple forms of Malayness. Multiple forms of Malayness. The nationalist Malays, the nationalist professors, of course, will not like it. They will see there's only a single form. And 8, ethnicity, civilization, and the fear of disappearing from this world. Echoing the statement by, so-called statement by Hang Tuah. Tak hilang Melayu di dunia. But actually, it's not echoed by Hang Tuah. It's not stated in Hang Tuah. This was put in Hang Tuah's mouth by Harun Aminur Rashid, the writer of Panglima Awang, 1956. He read Hang Tuah and he put that because he is trying to narrate the emergence and the re-emergence of the Malays after the violence incurred upon Panglima Awang, the ones who sailed through, because Panglima Awang was baptized. He was a Catholic. He was a Catholic for between 1511 to 1521. So when he was in Spain. So he was baptized. So again, that's the violence. And at that time, you must remember that it is normal. At that time, there was this reconquest, and Christians and Muslims were neighbors. So being converted or being forced to be converted is a normal sociological phenomenon in Spain. When we talk about Alhambra, this morning we're talking about Alhambra, 40th anniversary. And when we talk about Andalusia in South Asia, the Andalusia then lived in a society where Christians and Muslims were neighbors. And baptism is a normal thing. So Panglima Awang was Christian. When he came back, when I asked some scholars, is Panglima Awang Christian? They don't like my question. Yeah, it's illegal. Yeah, definitely. Malays are Muslim only after 1957. is a legal definition. So again, and we forgot the other side of the archipelago, the Philippines, they're Christians. And also in the Moluccas and Amboina, no, we hear in Malay, in Malaysia, masuk Melayu kan. Masuk Melayu means masuk Islam. Masuk Islam. But in Amboina and Moluccas, masuk Melayu means masuk Christian. So you can find this in some of the texts, Hikayat Tanah Itu dan sebagainya. Okay. I would finally come to the preface. I want to introduce you the preface. This now the preface by Andaya, now the preface by Milner. This is what Milner says of the preface. The Malays, the phrase throws up many images. The Malays, the phrase throws up many images. One might recall Joseph Conrad's mysterious, dangerous pirates. Conrad was Edward Said referred to, and he wrote the book on the Heart of Darkness. River, river, yeah, can be River Pahang. So, I think, yeah, River Congo, he was River Congo. He came to the archipelago. Yeah, he wrote another book, yeah, Almayer's Folly. Almayer's Folly, yeah. Yeah, he came here. He was here, Joseph Conrad. So, and in Conrad's Mysterious Dangerous Pirates, the best-mannered gentleman of the East, to Conrad, the best-mannered gentleman of the East, the lazy natives of the colonial economies, the new Malay entrepreneurs of modern triumphant Malaysia, the skillful region builders of ASEAN, the supporters of a multitude of monarchies and royal courts, unimaginable in Europe or elsewhere in the Asian region, a people divided over proper role of Islam, the Southeast Asian front in the struggle against terrorism. So that's, by extension, Joseph Conrad's description of the Malay. Lazy native, new Malay, entrepreneurs, triumphant Malaysia, region builders, supporters of multitude of monarchies and royal courts, people divided over proper role with Islam, and people who struggle against terrorism. There is something mercurial. There is something mercurial about the signifier Malay. Okay? Something this Milner notice it. We don't. Why? Because we are part of the society. We are like fish living in water, not realizing that it depends on water to live. So we are unconscious of the environment. But Milner is a non-participant. And this is important in research. Milner steps outside, spatially and temporally steps outside, so he can see this character of the Malay discourse, about the signifier Malay. Thinking about these images, one can rightfully wonder just who are these people? Not a normal question for the Malay. What is the essence of Malayness? Not a normal question for the Malay, even for the Malay scholar. Quite surprising. The Malay scholar must put himself or herself outside, then move inside. Move outside and move inside. Ethic and emic. So this is what I was telling Tuanku as a student. Ethic and emic. All of you, important in terms of what you do. Outside and inside. Ethic and emic. Emic is inside. Ethic is outside. So looking at society from inside and looking at society from outside. Meaning, in other words, we as Malays, or all of us, or our society, we look at our society from outside. But most of us subconsciously, even scholars and intellectuals, look at our society from inside. So when you look at society from inside, we may not get a full picture of that metaphysical view of the world. Why I'm telling you this? Because it happened to me. I look at society from a colonial perspective. Not colonial. I come from a very colonial school in the world. The most colonial school in the world is Penang Free School, for the record. The first English school east of Suez. Even we beat India. The first European school in India is the French school in Puducherry, 18, I think 1820, or 18, about, sorry, 1815 or 16. Penang Free School, 1816, English school. The first English school in India is 1824 in Madras. So Penang Free School is the most colonial school in the world. And I was there, purebred, Penang Free for 6 years. Every day I was fed with Keats, Yeats, Longfellow. I was fed with romantic poets, and my teachers appear as if they appeared from the meadows. Not from the periphery, exactly. So again, uh, so again, uh, but I should be, Anglophile. But what happened was I moved through I was conscious of myself individually. I was conscious of myself collectively, and I moved in and out of concepts. I moved in and out of collectivity and of existence. And I look at things when I travel, for example, I look at things from how, not necessarily colonial, but from how a white man looks at the Malay. And that creates fresh perspectives. When I go to Indonesia, for example, I used to go to Minangkabau, West Sumatra. I've been many times until the immigration asked me, Bapak ada isteri sini ke? There was one time, every month I used to go to Indonesia to Padang, Minangkabau, to visit and to do my research. This was 2008 until 2016-17. But when I go there, I look at the Minangkabaus from a different perspective. Like Andaya, how Andaya looks at the Minangkabau. Although Andaya is generally a Malay, a Filipino by birth, but he looks from things outside. He's basically American in terms of his outlook and worldview. So, yeah, exactly. So this is, as a scholar also, it's important, especially when you do sociology, when you do anthropology, and other aspects of the social sciences. So the essence of Malayness. The task of writing a book on the Malays is daunting, but he enjoyed it, of course. I asked him, he enjoys writing the book. A question from the outset is, exactly who ought to be called Malay? To many Malays, this is not an issue, not a question. We should not ask the question. Malay is Malay, that's it. We practice Malay culture, we speak Malay, and we're Islam. That's it, we are Malays. But my discourse of Malay is different. When in my classes, when I speak about Malay, I know some of my students over the last many semesters were confused. When I said a Malay can also be a Christian. When I gave a special dimension of the Malay, and someone asked, "Oh, must the Malay be Muslim?" I said, "Yeah, based on the Malaysian Federal Constitution, yes. But if we look at the Malay from the archipelagic perspective on the Malay world, the Malay need not be a Muslim. In other words, we have to know. So my expense of the Malay worldview and my expense of the Malay is the Malay as a citizen of the Malay world. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And some in the what you call it, the former East Indies, some in the Thailand, some in the Philippines, and the Philippines are Malays. And we say that we have been colonized by four, the Spaniards. Portuguese, Dutch, English, and the Spanish. The Spanish people power also colonized the Malay People, and they came as near as Brunei, and they came to Brunei. I know they had wars with the Castilian War, and they came to Amboina. So the Spanish is another colonial power. So again, question is who ought to be called Malay? According to one type of classification. Now, this is important in terms of scholarship, classification, typology, taxonomy. According to one type of classification used by some ideologues today, yeah, you know who these ideologues are. Maybe I'm one of them, I don't know. I'm also a subset of these groups. And rejected by most scholars, the Malays number 350 million, maybe more. He wrote this in the early 2000s. Now, some figures put it as maybe 400 million. 400 million. And when he mentioned this 350 million, it is not only the Malay archipelago. He is referring to from Madagascar to Hawaii to New Zealand and to Taiwan also. So again, and live across a vast territory from Papua to the east, it includes Papua, through Indonesia, Malaysia, and Thailand, to Madagascar in the west, up to through the Philippines to Taiwan. And some also, to look at the intricacies, also in Hainan, China, also in Hawaii. Hainan, there's a community of Cham, who are Muslims, and the Huis, any Hui, Huis, the Chinese Muslims. There are quite a number of Huis in ISTAC, I think, students. I'm also a descendant of a Hui. I'm a sixth generation. Yeah. Could be some gene interaction. Yeah. Yes. That's how when you check your DNA, you can find some this old genes that makes you relate to somebody in the other parts of the world. I have a Papua gene, 1%. I have also a Chamic gene, 1%. So yeah. Yes. Yeah. So again, this see, uh, Milner has introduced, but Milner's discourse is not based on genomics or this based on the DNA, not based on Milner's based on sociology. But he's mentioned he used this idea of genomics here. And then we have to consider the Malay communities in Sri Lanka and South Africa. Again, these are different groups. These are not indigenous. And he forgot to mention also in Suriname and Dutch Guyana. The same category of Malays in Sri Lanka and South Africa. They were slaves and they were brought there by the Dutch and by the British. But the Malays in Sri Lanka is interesting. They would see Sri Lanka as an extension of the Malay archipelago. And they would call it Sarandip. Sarandip or Sarandip, a very interesting word. I want to recall your research methodology. Have you come across this word, Sarandip? Or serendipity? No. Serendipity is a research term. There are two research terms very important for you. One is parsimony. Parsimony roughly means kerikut. You have to know when to stop. Parsimonies. You have to be parsimonious with your questions, with your materials, or with your facts, or with your narrative. especially in doing a thesis. In other words, there must be a point where you stop. That's it. Parsimonious. Be parsimonious with your project, the research project. In other words, you want to ask just a few questions. You cannot ask. You cannot conquer the world. Be parsimonious. Another one is serendipity. Serendipity is derived from the word sarandip. Sarandip is the old name for Sri Lanka. Sarandip means good things happening together. Good things happening together. So the history of the Malays in Sri Lanka is that of good things happening together. Geographically, culturally, what do you call it? Linguistically, sociologically. And there is a certain memory of the Malay Sri Lanka looking at the homeland. And the homeland, many of the Malay Sri Lanka come from Madura and Java. So because of some of them will go to Maldives, but mainly the Malay community in Sri Lanka, they identify themselves as Melayu Sri Lanka. And because of the high incidence of forced labor and forced migration by the Dutch, of the Maduris and of the Javanese and of people from Kedah also. So they call it Thailand. Thailand, and the adjective is di-Thailandkan. No, di-Thailandkan means being exiled. So there is a term and there is a memory that these people in Sri Lanka who are descendants of the Malays in the archipelago adalah orang yang di-Thailandkan, orang yang dibuang negeri. Why dibuang negeri? Because many of those were members of the aristocracy and the sultanates in the Malay archipelago. The Dutch do not want to lead. The Dutch do not want to resist the colonial power, so the Dutch exiled them to Sri Lanka. And these are people, and they form the military regiment in Sri Lanka. So again, anyway, okay, I'll give you 10 minutes more. Sri Lanka and South Africa. The scholarly literature about the Malays is enormous. Scholarly literature about the Malays is enormous. If you go back about 2 decades ago, you will find this resurgence in interest on the Malays and everything Malay. Coming from Europe, there was an international conference of the Malays by SOAS and in Leiden. But after that, there is a waning of interest. Not many people in Leiden or in SOAS now are studying Malay, actually. They are closing down some of the programs. Yeah, the only one in Leiden is Suryadi. And in SOAS, perhaps I think Muraika and 1 or 2 others. Ben Mutak has retired, and a few others. Babginski has passed away. And this German professor also is retired. The one who reminded me not to translate or not to study the light letters. I don't remember his name. I forgot his name. Yeah. Farah Raya is not. Yeah, he graduated from us. Yeah, he's not a student there. This guy is he's German. I forgot his name. He was a professor of Malay literature. He called me from London 2009. He said, "Don't study the light letters. Wait until I publish it first." So since then, I was negotiating. It took me 7 years to negotiate because it seemed that he was the culprit who told us, "I own the letters, so don't give it to Murad." So I went there 3 times. I was negotiating for copyrights. Finally, I got the rights, the digital rights. They asked me. Finally, the director, Susanna Rayner, director is the daughter of Tenbu. Tenbu is a historian, Singapore and Johor. Mary Tenbu. Mary Tenbu. Mary Tenbu. Yeah, she's the daughter of Merican. So she asked me whether I want to buy the letter. I said I don't have any money. But I told her, keep it. I just want the rights for to the digitized version. So finally, I got the rights in 2017. And then I convened an MOA with USN. I gave the whole thing to USN, the rights. But anyway, so the interest was there. And since the 1990s, I think that interest was transferred much to Malaysia, Australia, and especially Australia and Singapore. So it moved to that. And Singapore, in the 20 years back, has funded some of the projects for digitization. But again, we cannot deny the materials and the interest of scholars and archival materials in Leiden and SOAS. So the interest is there since 1816 and since 1816, the formation of, 1824, the establishment of King's College, when many of these materials were given, and 1916, when SOAS was established, one of which is to train colonial officers to come to Malaya. And yesterday we were talking about some of these colonial officers. The British were also discriminating. They sent many Welsh to Malaya because the English don't want to come. Because they say, okay, you Welsh, you are second-class citizen, you come and you rot in tropical climate. All the Scots, yeah, all the Welsh and the Scots, yeah. So again, this is what happened. Anyway, so the scholarly literature in the Malays is enormous. Something that if I were to have a second life or second career, I'll focus on the Malays. I'll focus on myself. Partly because of my identity and social condition. And some people look at me not as a Malay. In Penang, I'm a Mama. Socially, I'm a Malay. But also, if you look at the concentric circle of the Malay, yeah, maybe I think it's a Malay. But again, socially, culturally, ethnically, there's a third category, which is called fictive Malay. Fictive Malay. FICTIVE. I'm perhaps, part of it, but not so much macam say Moving Shepherd. Moving Shepherd is a Malay. Who Kick Him is a Malay. Yeah, you know what I mean? So again, that's the fictive Malay to the extreme. Okay? The smaller concentric circle is the homeland Malay. In other words, Malays who come from the Malay archipelago. The smallest concentric circle is the original Malay. Malays who originate from the Malay archipelago. So kalau in the peninsula, the original Malay to some people are the Biduandas in Negeri Sembilan, for example. Okay, anyway. So I will study the Malays. The question from the outset is exactly who ought to be called Malay. Then there are 350 million. The Dutch and the British officials who administered Malay territories were pioneers in their description and analysis, regardless of what we say. North American, Japanese, and Australian researchers have been active, especially over the last half century, and all this in addition to the major research that has been undertaken in Malaysia, Indonesia, Singapore, Brunei, the Philippines, Thailand, and Sri Lanka. So he's referring to other researchers, North American, Japanese, and Australian researchers as well. Historians, language and literature specialists, anthropologists, political scientists, geographers, economists, these and more have been developing Malay studies for decades, supplementing the investigations of the scholar officials of the colonial period, meaning supplementing people like Winstead, Wilkinson, what do you call it? Dusac, Swettenham, and so on. Malay studies has become an exciting field. I'm encouraging many of you here. And the research conversations in which scholars tend to be engaged is remarkable for the spirit of collaboration as well as debate. Even if one could master this great body of literature, well, you can imagine how Milner is excited and in awe, actually. Milner was in awe of the Malays. I do not think a book written today on the Malays would ever seek to convey the type of authority assumed by the colonial specialists. We do not write now about the real Malay as Governor Sir Frank Swettenham did a century ago. We do not employ confident brushstrokes to portray the character of a people and what might once have been called social and cultural facts. Questions of perspective are today nearly almost always present. How the Malays saw and see their situation. How the Malays saw and see their situation. In other words, if you are Malay, looking inside and outside. Outside in and inside out. Outside in and inside out. These are fundamentals in I mean, I mean, and I mean, and ethic. Uh, and just what categories the outside observer has or might have employed have thus become matters of compelling interest. Inevitably, this book reflects my own research experience, his own research experience, and focuses on the particular issues and debates which have caught my interest and often puzzled me. It puzzled him. Perhaps it has puzzled many of us. We may not be able to express, we have not expressed it. We may not have even asked the questions. I try to give the study breadth in considering social change over many centuries, and the range of Malay communities which I cover. But my preoccupations will be evident. In particular, I ponder the issues of who are the Malays and ask how they became Malay. Who are the Malays and how they became Malay? Questions which Malays do not ask. And what it means to be Malay. One thing that has intrigued me in particular is the often stated Malay anxiety about the lack of permanence, a fear of sometimes expressed in terms of an emphatic denial that Malays will disappear from this world. Again, echoing Hang Tuah. This book focuses, on how the ideas of being Malay developed among the people themselves. I'm interested in the history of ideas, and think this has been relatively neglected area in Malay studies. It's intellectual history. After discussing the early historical development of the people who were eventually to be called Malays themselves, who called themselves Malays, and then particularly Muslim civilization they forged, I examine the emergence of the localization of the concept of the Malay race or Malay ethnicity, Bangsa Melayu. This process began in the colonial period and has been influenced in varying fashions in the several nation states into which Malays have been incorporated, and sometimes happily, sometimes not. Okay? Incorporated happily, maybe here, sometimes not, maybe in what we call South Thailand or the Philippines. Being Malay, it seems to me, means different things in different places. Being Malay means different things in different places. Singapore, Indonesia, Malaysia, and other parts. These are different places and it means different things. And even in Malaysia itself, in being Malay in Sabah, Sarawak, in Pahang, in Kelantan, in Melaka, in Penang, maybe in different things. In certain contexts, I would suggest it has entailed a fusion, very important here, a fusion between Western notions of ethnicity, and older local Malay concepts of community. So here, when we talk about Malay, our consciousness have been fused with the consciousness of the other. The other means Western notions, and the other will also mean other communities within our vicinity. Our notion of the Malay in Malaysia, for example, have been influenced by our Chinese neighbors, by the Indians, but they're orang asli. They live in close proximity with them. And imagine if we live in other contexts and at other times without in close proximity with others, then we will have a different conception of us. Think of the Japanese, for example, in early years. Um, okay, I think I will stop here, right? Thank you very much. This is an introduction based faithfully on a close reading of their preface. My next lecture will subsequently be on Milner's book. I'll move to chapter 1 on thinking about the Malays and Malays. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof, for very eye-opening and I might say full of Malay consciousness discussion. So maybe I think I will open one question.
Yeah. Or comments or views.
Yeah, comments, suggestions.
Criticisms. Welcome. Of not only of me, but of the Malays.
Okay.
Ada perbezaan peristilahan antara Indonesia Timur dengan di belah barat kan. Kalau di belah Indonesia Barat, tak silap saya dalam Milner juga kata masuk Melayu itu bagi orang Batak adalah masuk Islam ataupun meniru-niru adat istiadatnya. Dan kalau di belah Timur pula kata dalam buku yang apa The Malays tu pula katanya masuk Kristian. Jadi adakah sebenarnya dalam pemahaman di kepulauan kita ni Melayu itu merujuk kepada keadaan masyarakat yang lebih madani gitu?
Maksud madani apa dia?
Civilized.
Yeah, we are civilized. Yeah. In that sense, kalau this shows the different understandings of the Malay, the diverse ways of looking at the Malay, and the multiple readings of the Malay based on the consciousness of the people who call themselves Malays, or the consciousness of the people who are called Malays, or who are in proximity with the Malays. In other words, another description is the Malay is a multi-ethnic people. It's not a single ethnic, like, for example, I may be wrong, like the Chinese. Even the Chinese are not single ethnic. A supra or supra-ethnic. In other words, the Malay, as such, deriving from the Austronesian linguistic family, is a supra-ethnic race and a multi-ethnic, going beyond ethnicities. So, in other words, you can look at the Malay from a variety of ways, a variety of existence. So this is what Milner is saying. This is Milner's point, that there is no singular ethnicity to the Malay. Also that, yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yes. Exactly. So why we call them Malays? Generally, the word Melayu is I'll put it this way. Over the last decades, there have been waves at deconstructing Malay identity, saying that there is no such thing as Malay identity, but there is such thing as the Batak, the Minangkabau, the Jawa. In other words, the Malays express themselves in these ethnic terms. At the same time, you have to look at the Malay in monolithic ways, deriving from the Austronesian ancestral punya origin. In other words, looking at the Malay world. Yeah? The Malay world it can be equivalent to the European world, can be equivalent to the Arab world. Why? Maybe I can leave you with this. Why would we in Malaysia, both Malays and non-Malays, question the existence of the Malay world, but we do not question the existence of the European world or the Arab world or the Turkish world? Example, the Arab world. Okay, okay, the European world. European world daripada island sampai ke Russia. The Russians do not understand English. The Germans do not understand Italian. But they still fit into the European world. They are different Europeans. Similarly, the Malays in KL do not understand the Malays in Kelantan. Do not understand the Japanese. And we take this as a problem. We take this as Malay disunity. No, because we are in the Malay world. Some are Arab. The Arab in Maghribi do not understand the Arabs in Hadramaut. The Turks in Turkey do not understand the Uyghur, because Uyghur has only 50% of the. So again, if we understand, if we accept these different worlds, we should understand the Malay world. It should happen that it's called the Malay world culturally. Again, and people say, why not call it Javanese world? It so happened that the scholars they were led to use the term Malay. Yeah, sure.
And Assalamualaikum. Because you mentioned at the start and then later now about this deconstruction of what Malay means. Yeah, I think we must also look at the reality, the political factor. Okay, I think the question of Malayness, Malay world is not really discussed elsewhere, but also in Malaysia because of the politics, because of the composition, because we have in our constitution articles that protect Malayness. And in that Malayness, according to our legal definition of what is Malay, is Islam. And so Islam as the federal religion. So I think the reality is because there are people out there who want to attack that. Because we have, what do you call it? Malay special, what's the actual keisman bahasa Melayu? Malaysia special rights, right? Because under the constitution, the Yang di-Pertuan Agong must protect the Malay rights, but without or denying also the rights of other cultures and communities. So actually that is being attacked by certain parties. So if you look at this, even the timeline of the book, contesting Malayness 2004, and then Milner's book on the Malays 2008, and also the list from Andaya 2008. So there is actually a response to the real situation. So this whole thing is because there are people out there they actually want to abolish Malay rights, and along with it, you want to abolish the special place of Islam. You know, because we miss out. This is the reality on the ground actually, and this is what I'm pitching. This is what I would say. What's your response to that?
This discourse by Andaya and Milner is resonates the attempt to deconstruct the Malays and Malayness, and to look at the Malays as equivalent to other races in Malaysia.
Perfect. I was trying to interpret, so the Malay civilization, as well as in the Indian part, it was fluid, and the amalgamation of the Indians or the Arabs or the Chinese, even I was reading some old documents from Chinese, they amalgamated naturally. There was the nature of habitation, the nature of settlement was similarish. But it was only after colonization when slaves and Chinese or Indians were forcefully sent into this part of the world where this rigidity of identities started to develop. That's how I interpret it. And it has now become more, as you were saying, that it has become now an identity crisis. The Muslim identity needs to be saved because of this competition that is now taking place. Am I interpreting it right?
Precisely. Exactly. The rigidity of racial classification began in the 1880s, 1890s. And you can see that in the census report. The census classified us. We are conditioned, our identity is conditioned by the Census Bureau in the 1880, 1890 during COVID, because they used the census to divide and control.
Interesting that you mentioned that, because the colonialism, yeah, because I think when before that, if other people, from other parts, from India or China, if they come to the Malay land and they want to stay long, they tend to assimilate, and that's when they become masuk Melayu. Yeah, whereas British consciously put them in different places to create the tension that we have now. And that's how I see it. They consciously put. Otherwise, the Chinese who stays long, they will become Melayu, most probably.
This is a phenomenon of migrant labor. Migrant labor came to the wave of migrant labor came to Malaya in about 1850s. That's when the problem began. Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
Can I share just one interesting fact? Lot of the migrant laborers, say from Bangladesh, who settles in different parts of the world, when they go back to country, they also struggle, because they kind of absorb some of the cultural aspects of staying in Malay world or staying in Arab
Yeah.
world.
Exactly. Yeah. True. Yeah.
Doctor, can we say that the consciousness of the Malay identity happened throughout bahasa Jawi, like the thesis from uh, Prof. Alatas. So first, when we try to put it in a map, so we will go to which country that's still using the bahasa Jawi or used to have the bahasa Jawi. The script.
Into Alatas, it was Islam and Jawi that transformed and forged Malay identity. Alatas gave this narrative of the total turn from Shiva Buddhist to Islam, and Jawi is Islamic language. So he said Malay Bahasa Melayu is one of the Islamic languages. Normally we would turn to Arabic, Urdu, Parsi as Islamic languages, but he said Malay is an Islamic language, and some people I know over the last few years would say that would term it as Bahasa Jawi. In other words, the Bahasa Melayu in Rumi is not Bahasa Melayu. It is Bahasa Romani or Bahasa what, tapi yang Jawi itu is, but you can say in as a category, Malay language is Bahasa Jawi. Okay. Yeah. Because Jawi is not only Melayu. Jawi is also Urdu, Turki, Parsi is Jawi. Is written, it is writing, is the alphabet. Is the alphabet. Yeah. But what Al-Atas said is not only peculiar to Bahasa Melayu. He should have said it is also peculiar to Bahasa Turki, Bahasa Parsi, Bahasa Urdu, Bahasa Malabari, Bahasa Tamil, Bahasa Swahili, and many other languages having the huruf Jawi, tapi bahasa tu kan bahasa Arab, bahasa lokal, sama juga macam bahasa Melayu. Okay. This is another interesting thing. The Jawi, if we study the Jawi among the Sri Lanka Malays, when the Sri Lanka Malays went to Sri Lanka, 1800, they write in Jawi. They call it Bahasa Gundul. Macam huruf Jawa yang tak ada titik. Tak ada titik masuk is called Bahasa Gundul. So that's Jawi. Gundul botak, yeah. So this is a script used in the literature among the literary circles in Sri Lanka, 1900. Here you can see the wisdom of the Constitution. Okay? Regardless of when I talk about the Malay, I also mean beyond the Constitution. I mean beyond Malaysia. But when we talk about the Constitution, satu is the Constitution gives a legal definition of the Malay for reasons that we have spoken about. Two, by implication, it links intertwine the Malay culture, language to Islam. Hence, you can imply the huruf Jawi as such. No other country has done that.
Okay, so thank you, Prof, and also for to the audience for the dynamic engagement in this discussion. We also like to thank Prof. Dato' Ahmad Murad Merican for sharing his wisdom with us today. So with that, we conclude our first session of reading on Melayu. So maybe when is the next session? In August. So we meet you in August. So before we close the session, let's gather around for photography session. So with that, wabillahi taufiq wa hidayah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Assalamualaikum. Thank you very much for your time and interest.